It's finally here. I have been beyond excited for this episode to air because I think it is such an important and crucial topic. I have been coaching and personal training people since I was 20, so I'm almost hitting my 20-year mark. I started a long time ago. And one of the number one things I've seen as I've coached clients is that self-sabotage runs rampant. I've seen it in so many different facets with my clients, and I've also seen it even in myself, which I'm going to openly talk about in today's episode as well. So when I stumbled upon Thias Gibson, I was amazed at the way that she did things and how they made complete sense. And it was slightly different than what I had seen covering this topic before. I learned so much even just interviewing her. So I hope that you love this episode as much as I do, because I was thinking about it all during the episode. I was thinking about it the next day for the next week. I haven't stopped thinking about it. And I've even adjusted some of the things I'm doing based on what she's saying to really improve my subconscious mind, which is going to help improve my own self-sabotaging behaviors. And there is no doubt in my mind that you can do the same. Thias Gibson is a counselor, bestselling author, and the co-founder of the Personal Development School. She is a PhD and over 13 certifications in modalities ranging from CBT, NLP, somatic experiencing, internal family systems, and even shadowing work in hypnosis. Thias nearly has a decade of experience running a successful private practice and founded the Personal Development School, an online learning platform to provide a more accessible, authentic way for clients to transform their lives. Thias is a leading expert in attachment theory, and her cutting-edge research is extending the frontier of psychology and her modern Gibson integrated attachment theory. She is on a mission to empower individuals to overcome their insecure attachment styles and improve any limiting beliefs and behaviors, creating long-lasting and enlightening changes. She is also the best-selling author of Learning Love, and she and her husband split their time between Austin, Texas, and Toronto, Canada. I promise you, you are in for a treat. You are going to adore her and everything she's going to teach today, because it was so simple and so clear, and it made complete sense on how we can honestly improve self-sabotage. And before we get into today's episode, I do want to say that the podcast today is actually sponsored by Make Fit Simple app, which is the app that I created about 6 to 7 months ago. I worked on it for 2 years. I built it completely from scratch because I wanted a place where people could get help with health from a holistic standpoint. So while I have multiple programs in there you can do from at home or the gym, I have the strength and sculpt plan, the interval plan, a beginner interval plan, a beginner strength plan, a postpartum plan, a body weight plan, and so much more. All of the moves are broken down. They have cues, they have visuals, so it is a fit for anyone at any stage. There's also 100 recipes in there broken down by categories, so you can find the right recipe for you. And my favorite section is actually our resource section, where I have tons of other experts sharing their expertise on topics anywhere from mental health, mindset, core work, pelvic floor, form and exercise tips, mobility, so many different topics. I wanted to bring amazing experts to you to help you learn and really make health holistic, because I really do believe all the pieces work together. And that combined with today's topic on self-sabotage is going to be amazing. So if you want to try out the Make Fit Simple app, 7 days free. The link is going to be in the bio. And again, 7 days are free, and you can see how you like it with tons of programs, tons of recipes, and tons of educational resources. Just tap on the link in the show notes. My name's Andrea Allen, and I am a mother of 4 girls under 7, a wifey to a mountain man, a personal trainer, and a nutrition coach. I love all things women's health and fitness, but let's face it, the fitness industry is complicated and it's not built for the everyday mom. There's so much conflicting information, and you're busy and you don't have time to figure it out. I hate feeling confused and overwhelmed, so I have made it my mission to simplify health and fitness while creating a welcoming, realistic, and empowering home for like-minded women. I'm happy you're here, and I hope you stay a while. Thias, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. This is a topic that I feel like is huge and also overwhelming for people because they don't really recognize it sometimes or even know how to adjust around it.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful to be here with you and can't wait to dive in.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your background so everyone can get to know you.
So I grew up as somebody who kind of went through like a lot of childhood chaos and had a lot of kind of confusion around me. And I think as a result of that, I just spent a lot of time wondering, why people behave the way that they behave and why people do the things that they do. And so I was really, really interested in psychology. By the time I was a teenager, I was kind of going through my own like dark night of the soul. I was going through a lot of different challenges and just difficulties and trying to figure out my own patterns of behavior. And so I was in university for psychology, and I kept having themes in my life where I would tell myself, I am going to do something differently. I'm going to break a bad habit. I'm going to go down a different path. And I would keep telling myself, I'm going to stop doing these unhealthy things. And then I would find myself looping back into those same patterns of behavior over and over again, despite telling myself on a daily basis that I was going to change my relationship to how I express my emotions or change my relationship to how I coped with different things and tried to numb myself out in a lot of different ways. And yet I didn't really see that happen. And one day I was in a psychology class and somebody said to me, oh, your conscious mind can't outwill or overpower your subconscious mind. And your
Oh.
conscious mind, and your conscious mind is responsible for roughly 3 to 5% of all of your beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and decisions or actions. And your subconscious mind, which is sort of like our habituated self, our subconscious mind is responsible for 95 to 97%. And I was like, oh my goodness, why aren't people talking about this? And so your conscious mind is like your logical thinking self. Your subconscious mind is like all of your habits and patterns. If you imagine, for example, that you're trying to drive a car for the first time, and your conscious mind has to be like, turn the signal, take the car out of park, make sure you stay in your lane, steer this way and that way, look over your shoulder as you're crossing lanes. Like we have to consciously think about everything. And then over time, as it becomes habituated, it gets conditioned into our subconscious mind, patterned into our subconscious mind as a habit. And then a few weeks later, we end up just getting in the car and we can talk on the phone, we can change the music, we can be off daydreaming in thought because it's our subconscious mind essentially at that point knowing how to drive a car. So that part of ourselves is actually responsible for 95+% of how we function. And to me, I was like obsessed with that. I was like, how come nobody's talking about this?
Yeah, I'm blown away that that's so high. Like in my brain, I'm like, oh, I feel like but as you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I do a lot out of patterns. It's like when you get off on an exit you're not meaning to get off at, and you're like, oh, I just did it because that's what I do. And then you're like, that's not where I was supposed to get off. So that makes sense to me.
Exactly. And so for me, I was like, oh my goodness. So I got really interested in studying psychology, but really at the subconscious level. So I was in school for psych, and then I went down the path of like hypnotherapy, and then I went down the path of NLP, neuro linguistic programming, a lot of how we obtain our conditioning, and then really focus on how we can reprogram. And for me, I spent my first year in client practice actually hypnotizing people, and it just never sat that great with me. Like I just felt like it was kind of like a strange power dynamic, A, and B, I also thought it was like give the man a fish instead of teach a man to fish. Like instead of having them come in and have to be reliant on you to get this breakthrough, why not teach people how their subconscious works and how they can actually recondition their own patterns? So I really went down that path, and that has so much to do with our topic today, because so much of what we experience as self-sabotage is not us waking up on Monday morning saying, I'm going to sabotage myself today.
Yeah.
What we experience as self-sabotage is our conscious mind intending to do something different, like stop binge eating, or don't eat so much junk food, or eat cleaner meals. Like it's our conscious mind intending that, but our subconscious mind has different motives and programs, and so we keep repeating old patterns of behavior until we really learn how the subconscious mind works.
Which is pretty rough because then your conscious mind beats up on yourself for not being able to change. So and it's brutal. Like that's brutal, So let's talk about what is self-sabotage. Like let's just break it down that simple. What is it?
Yeah, so self-sabotage, what we experience as self-sabotage is us intending to do something, whether it be starting something new or breaking something that we perceive as negative. But our subconscious mind doesn't perceive it as negative, or our subconscious mind isn't intending to start something new. So we experience this push-pull dynamic, and it's actually a form of cognitive dissonance between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. And unfortunately, going back to that theme of how like our conscious mind can't outwill or overpower our subconscious mind, we'll often find ourselves in positions where we start to set a New Year's resolution or a new goal for ourselves, but then our subconscious has different motives, and we experience friction or resistance towards that goal because our patterning is not actually lining up with what our conscious mind intends.
So, what are some behavioral examples that we might not recognize that are self sabotaging behaviors? Like, how can we recognize? Because I think some people might say, okay, so it's my subconscious mind, but they might not even see the behaviors or patterns to realize that's what's happening.
Yes. So it's any time in our lives that we intend something and don't really follow through. So you can look at things like procrastination would be a form of self-sabotage where we're like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to finish that work task. And then we're like on social media or talking on the phone or, something comes up. Or anytime we set a goal, I'm going to generate a second stream of income. I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to go to the gym every day. I am going to finish this project that I've been wanting to work on for years in the background, like writing a book. Anytime we intend something and we don't follow through, those are all examples of self-sabotage.
I don't think I would always recognize like perfection or procrastination. I think I'd recognize procrastination, but not maybe perfection or some of those other, things of like setting a goal as self sabotage.
So if anybody's ever had the experience of sitting down and going, I feel frustrated that I'm not following through, or I feel myself leaning into something where I put all this extra pressure on myself, and then I start to feel negatively about the task that I'm doing. At that point, that would all be an experience of, hey, I'm sabotaging myself because I'm not following through. And there's reasons underneath this as to why this actually happens. So there's two things to keep in mind. Not only can your conscious mind not outwill your subconscious mind, but on top of that, when you have the actual experience of saying, hey, I really want to perform at something, but you feel negative feelings towards it. You find yourself feeling in resistance or friction or frustration or being too hard on yourself. All of those things end up being symptoms of self-sabotage. And it's because your subconscious can have two things at work. Number one, we can have limiting beliefs. So you can have the experience of, if you believe something about the task, your subconscious will block you. So for example, let's just take a traditional thing you'll see for a lot of women nowadays. Some women will have the recognition consciously of like, oh, I need to set better boundaries in my life. I'm doing too much, or I'm taking on too much, or I'm saying yes to everything, and I'm not asking for enough support. But if in childhood we got conditioned to believe that when we set a boundary, we would be disliked for it, if we said no to somebody, we would be seen as bad or unlikable, or somebody would get frustrated with us, then our subconscious gets conditioned to think setting boundaries will make me feel disliked or unsafe emotionally around other people. And so our conscious mind can realize and have this logical thought of like, setting boundaries is smart, and that's what I need more of in my life. But our subconscious may actually block us, because at the end of the day, our subconscious mind is the one making decisions. So anytime we have that intention and then we don't follow through, it's often because we have these limiting beliefs that are actually in our subconscious mind from past patterned experiences that are actually directing how we make choices and decisions.
Okay, we got to talk more about these limiting beliefs then, because I do, as you said that, so you're saying there's a lot of basically underlying beliefs and fears that are causing it. So what are some more examples of that? Because the one you gave was really good and clear. Like, when else is that happening that we may not be recognizing, and then we're hard on ourselves?
So it happens in two ways. So if we look at the belief way first, limiting beliefs that you'll see a lot of the time. So this is actually from cognitive behavioral therapy. There tend to be core limiting beliefs that we carry. And these are things like, I will be abandoned, I will be betrayed, I am not good enough, unworthy, disliked, I am rejected or will be alone, I will be trapped or helpless or powerless. So we tend to have these big core fears. And so what happens is, our subconscious mind is like a warehouse. It's the container of all information. It actually stores all information, and it stores information negatively and holds on to it a little bit more than it does positively. So for example, if you're walking through the forest and you see a bear and you run away from the bear, the next day when you think of, oh my gosh, I saw that bear in the forest yesterday and thank goodness I escaped, you don't remember what the pretty tree looked like next to the bear. You remember the bear and its teeth. So we're actually wired to hang on to negative experiences more than positive experiences, because hang on to negative experiences keeps us safe, right? We can protect and prevent ourselves from having those
Oh,
things recur.
yeah.
So what that does is, sure, it keeps us safe, but we're not really living in like a survival oriented world so much anymore, where we have to like, run away from survival threats and there's predators and prey. So now we have this mechanism, this like, wired system that's evolved over years and years to put us in a position where anytime we feel like criticized as children or growing up, we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. And we can really store that. And then, we form these limiting beliefs as a result of past experiences like that. If we felt abandoned by somebody we loved, we store that. We think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be abandoned again in the future. And so what happens is we take negative experiences from the past, our subconscious mind holds on to them really tightly as a means of self-protection. But then our subconscious mind is sort of the lens we see the world through. So what happens is in our adult lives, when we're scared of something or we're out of our comfort zone, we'll always jump back to those past conclusions from previous experiences. We'll say, oh, but I was not good enough and I failed at public speaking 12 years ago. So why am I going to give a speech in front of all my colleagues at work tomorrow? I'm not good enough at that. And so what ends up happening is our conscious mind can want to do all these things, but our subconscious mind is going, no, we have these negative limiting beliefs, and those limiting beliefs are the things that block us. So we can see that happen with our change in eating habits. If somebody's intending to start a new regimen for something and their conscious mind says, we're going to do this. And then if their subconscious has a limiting belief that says, no, I always fail at things like this.
Yeah,
Or
you've done it before and it didn't work. Yeah.
exactly. Then we have these belief systems that are actually sabotaging us. And then we experience this push pull dynamic where we want to do something, but we don't find ourselves following through. And it's actually because we have these blocks at a subconscious level of these limiting beliefs due to difficult past experiences that we've stored. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, it makes total sense to me. So then those underlying beliefs, are they then causing fear? Like, how does that link with fear then?
Great question. So we tend to fear painful experiences recurring. So the mind is more wired to avoid pain than it is to seek pleasure, because again, it's mostly survival wired at the end of the day. And so we'll have this experience of I like to call it reprojecting. We take these past experiences and we say, this happened before, this is going to happen again. So for one woman, for example, it could be she wants to start going to the gym, but the last time she tried to do something that was a new goal, her subconscious experienced failure. So she could have a limiting belief that says, well, I'm going to fail because when I tried to do something outside of my comfort zone last time, I failed. So why would I bother? And so we don't realize that because our subconscious mind is responsible for like 95% of all of our decisions, we often don't even consciously realize it's happening. We'll just experience feeling resistance towards a goal. We'll experience feeling like, I don't know if I can do it. Or the day that we're supposed to go to the gym, we feel like, oh, I don't know. It's not really working for me. I'm not feeling like it today. And we don't realize that it's actually these subconscious limiting beliefs that are propping up. And beliefs produce emotional output. So when we have a negative belief triggered, we feel negative emotions. And then neuroscience has actually proven every single action we take is because of our emotional state. So even people who think they're logical, rational thinkers, they're still just making emotionally based decisions at the tipping point, and then they're just quick to rationalize through logic. So we have this experience of having like beliefs that fire off, and then we feel negative feelings like resistance or frustration or fear around something. And then our action to cope with that is to go away from the thing that we are associating as causing the fear or discomfort. So that's sort of like if you imagine an acronym like BEA, beliefs create emotional output, create actions. Well, here's what's happening. We have these subconscious limiting beliefs. All of a sudden we feel badly. Our actions follow that. And now we experience all this procrastination or self-sabotage towards the goal that we're really intending. Now, the good news is that we can actually rewire our limiting beliefs. And we can talk maybe in a little bit about how to do that.
Yes, I definitely want to talk about that because I'm fascinated that I'm still blown away, like you said at the beginning, that so much is subconscious and not as much is like awareness. So before we get into like triggers and how we can rewire, how does that affect even relationships, and like how can we recognize those patterns in relationships and in careers and in personal development, I should say, even more. And then let's get into like triggers and what we can do about it, because it's great for us to recognize that, but myself, like anyone else, I'm like, I do some things too that I catch myself that I'm, resistant towards where I want to work on something or develop something or become better at something. And I do it too. I self-sabotage too, where I'm like, I've never really been good at that. And then you almost label yourself like, I'm always this. And then once you've labeled yourself, you just continue to do things that prove that you are always this, whatever, insert whatever it is, you know? So I definitely want to talk about that. But how does it even affect our relationships and just personal growth in general?
Yeah, it's a great share. And you're right. Like once we label ourselves, we come to identify with that. And that's part of how we form a belief system is we think that we are something. So we just believe it automatically and it becomes that part of our conditioning.
Yes.
Oh, I'm somebody who doesn't know how to go outside of my comfort zone, or I'm somebody who just, doesn't like to follow through on things, or, I'm great at starting things but not finishing them. Like we can tell ourselves all these theories, but it's actually what actually conditions and creates this belief is repetition and emotion. So when we tell ourselves something enough, it's actually what fires and wires neural pathways. And then that becomes a part of our programming or conditioning. We're like, oh, I am this. And that's when we've really formed that belief system. So it's really interesting that you said that. So how does this affect relationships? So you'll see this in everywhere. For example, we tend to actually in relationships first, we tend to form these negative beliefs because of a lot of the way that we were raised. And so a lot of our modeling in childhood teaches us about what to expect about love and connection. So if we saw that, somebody grew up in a household where there was a lot of criticism, even if parents were like meaning the absolute best, it's very likely that a child's going to form a belief system that says, I'm not good enough, or I'm unworthy, or I will fail. Because if they get a B plus and the parent says, well, where's your A? Then they might go, oh, it's never good enough. And so the repetition and emotion of having that reinforced creates this belief system. And now that's something that's going to come up when they go to a job interview, when they go to start a new project or a new goal, that's going to fire off. And it's actually going to be a part of what sabotages their performance. So you see that in the way we were raised. You see that people will carry different fears in relationships. Some people really fear abandonment in relationships. Some people fear engulfment or being trapped in relationships. Some people fear their trust being broken in relationships. So these are all limiting beliefs that are picked up from earlier past experiences that fired and wired long enough that they formed the way that we see ourselves and other people. And now we reproject them out onto our external world because the subconscious mind is like the lens we see the world through. If we've been betrayed in the past, we think we'll be betrayed in the future. If we've been abandoned in the past, we think everyone will abandon us. And those become our triggers as adults. Those become the things that we fear the most and cause the most emotional havoc for us. So those are, examples with relationships. When you look at career, the same things happen. It's the exact same dynamic. If you felt not good enough and you go in for a job interview, you're going to start telling the story. I'm not prepared enough. I'm not interesting enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not, well equipped enough for this job interview. And then you're going to start feeling insecure. And then you're going to see that affects your performance, how you take action.
Then you act insecure in the job interview, and then you're like, I knew it. But it was really
Exactly.
yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. So you nailed that, which is like that so many of our limiting beliefs, they just become self-fulfilling prophecies. That's the hardest part about the sabotaging effect is that our conscious mind can so badly want to follow through or to create a new habit or to change things. But if these limiting beliefs are there, they're still going to sabotage us. And then we tell ourselves, our conscious mind observes it and says, oh, see, I'm always like this. This always happens to me. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see it with every type of belief. Abandonment, then someone hangs on too tight. They're scared of being abandoned, but they hang on so tight, they accidentally push somebody away. And then all of a sudden they're like, see, everybody abandons me. And so you see this in every form of limiting belief that comes up. And that can be such a defeating process for people. And the just last thing I'll say is even in our relationship to like diet or exercise, like the health area of life, again, if we have these goals to change how we eat or stop eating after 8 p.m. or whatever it might be, to do intermittent fasting, but then we have these limiting beliefs like, no, that's uncomfortable. I don't do well with discomfort, or I'm incapable of really making change. I've tried to change my habits before and nothing really happens, or I always gain weight. I never lose weight. These types of ideas, they are actually the root cause of why we'll go down the same behavioral patterns and then keep getting the same types of results.
I have my best friend and I always even talk about how people look through, like you mentioned, a lens. Like we look through different windows, and sometimes I'll see a situation and someone else on my staff will see a situation totally different because of their beliefs and sometimes their limiting beliefs where they'll think something's happening and I'm like, no, I don't think that at all. Like my brain doesn't even think like that. You know what I mean? But because of experiences they have had, they assume that, so-and-so's thinking this or so-and-so's doing this because of this. And it's really not. So like you said, it really, we're hurting ourselves. So let's figure out some triggers that we can recognize and let's figure out what to do about it. Because I think everyone could sit back and say, Yeah, sometimes I do, A, B, or C in the situation because I imagine this is going to happen. So they're trying to protect themselves.
Yeah, such a great share. And I really agree with you about the windows. I like that analogy. It's like the
Oh,
windows
I
we look
always
in
do.
something.
Like their window's slightly pink or it's dark or they've got blackout shades or whatever. Like they're all different. The angles of the windows on your houses are different. And not everyone sees through the same window. It's like you can look at the same issue and someone can have such a different view of it. And I'm like, it's just a different window pane?
Totally. I had somebody in a meeting yesterday or on Friday, and they said to me, they were like, "Yeah, this employee." So it was like us, myself, and one of our CEOs, like C-level executives in our company, and we had another employee come in and have a conversation, and our C-level executive was like, "Oh, they were being really disrespectful." And to me, like I only observed it as the person having like kind of a hard day and being down on themselves.
Yeah.
And that person was like, "Oh, they're disrespecting like me and you." And I was like, "Oh, no, no, no. They were just
Oh,
having like a
yeah.
hard day."
Hmm.
And it's funny because one of the big core triggers is I am disrespected. And so,
Yeah.
if we felt like that in the past and we stored that, then we always see things through that particular lens. And so that's how our beliefs will really affect us. So to your question, when it comes to these beliefs, a great way to first identify them is when we are experiencing. So when we look at self-sabotage, when we are experiencing resistance towards the goal, a lack of follow through, or a feeling of like push pull, almost like you're going towards something and the gas and the brakes on are on at the same time in your life. Like you have a project and you're just trying to get there and finish it, but you just feel like I'm getting there and then I take a step back. I move and I take a step back. Any of those things, when we observe those experiences happening, the first thing I want people to ask themselves is, what am I afraid will happen if I really follow through here? Like, what am I afraid will happen if I really show up or if I like pour myself into this wholeheartedly? And a lot of times, what you'll see is that's a great activating question to bring up what somebody's limiting belief or trigger is. So, somebody may say, okay, if I really show up and really try, I'm going to realize that I failed. And then I'm just going to feel like I'm a failure. Or if I really show up and really try, and the person I'm working on this project with doesn't, I'm going to feel taken advantage of or betrayed. And it's going to be unfair. Or, so we'll have these different beliefs. I'm going to, really try and I'm going to expose myself as not being good enough. And so now we've sourced our actual limiting belief, like what specifically is blocking you subconsciously. Because if we can recondition that, now your conscious mind can intend something with no subconscious blocks. And now you're tapping into the powerhouse that you actually are, and without all of this friction between your subconscious mind that really can't be outwilled at the end of the day. So step one is to like source that limiting belief. I don't know if do you want to try one maybe and we can do one together?
Yes, I actually know of one. So I have found that sometimes I played sports all growing up. Like I even played lacrosse in college. I'm really used to being very competitive. And I have found that as an adult, sometimes I will not, I don't want to say not participate, but sometimes I won't try in things because I don't like to lose and I don't like to feel like I failed at it. You know what I mean? So for example, like, a couple of my friends have learned to play pickleball really well. And I was pregnant and then I was postpartum and I just wasn't able to keep up because they could go more often. And then I found that I didn't want to go with them because I was like, or when I win, I wouldn't really try. And I'd be like, well, why can't I get better? Well, because I've never really tried because I didn't want to show that I was worse than them. You know what I mean? Because I'm competitive. And so I didn't
Yes.
want to show. And so what did I do? I stopped going. Or when I win, I would just act like I didn't care and not really try. Well, you can't get better if you're not really trying. You can't. And so and then I was like, well, I just didn't get better. So this isn't for me. So as you're saying that, I was like, this is exactly what I did because I was fearful that I couldn't keep up and that I would be a burden. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, now my partner won't play with me. Now, this is such a silly thing because it's just playing sports, but I think I do that in other aspects of my life too. Like, that's an easy casual one. But in general, like when I feel like I'm going to be a burden on someone, I don't like that. Like, I like to carry my weight. I like to carry my weight and I'll happily carry someone else's, but I don't want you to have to carry mine. And so I do that. Like, I can say I do that.
And that's such a powerful share of like the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because then you can see how, because you believe that, you pull away because we feel a certain way, and then we are wired to resist and go against any negative feelings or associations, and then our behaviors always follow that. And so then you see the behavior actually reinforces the belief that like, oh, I'll go but I'll be a burden, or I'm not, I might fail. And then you have that belief, but it's like stopping you from trying so that you can grow, so that you don't have to feel like that.
Totally. And that's like an easy example. You know what I mean? Like a not that example doesn't matter, but I can say that I do that in other aspects of my life that do matter. You know what I mean? Where you're like, I don't want to be a burden, or I don't want to fail at this because I'm used to like, just being competitive. I've just been that way my whole life, So that is definitely something that is self-sabotaging to me, where I sometimes won't really try because I'm fearful of not doing it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, beautiful share. And you'll see this, like everybody has versions of this. And so thank you for sharing that, because that's a great, example for everybody. And I'll share just one example too, so people have multiple examples to relate to. I used to carry this really big wound of like I would feel taken advantage of, because I'm 0 or 100. Like I'll pour myself into things so much, and then I found myself going into situations where I kept doing that. And then I would just like resist situations. I would be like, okay, I'm just feeling taken advantage of. And rather than speaking up, this was a big lesson for me. I would be like, oh, this person's taking advantage of me on like a work project or something like that. So I would just shut down and pull away from them. And I would never have the conversation to say, hey, I need you to pull your weight, or hey, I have to have better boundaries, and have that conversation. So then I would just be like, see, even when I shut down and didn't
Yeah.
try as hard, the person still tried to milk it. And so, I learned over time, like, oh my goodness, I have to actually work through that belief. And then that changed my behaviors, where the moment I felt an imbalance, I would say to somebody, hey, I'm doing this and this. I really need your support too. And that actually totally changed that pattern for me in my life as a result. So we can go into the actual, do you want to talk about some reprogramming of the actual limiting beliefs themselves?
Yeah, let's definitely do. And I love that we had two different examples. And I'm sure anyone listening can think like, oh, can find a pattern or something they do, because even as you're talking, I can think of more in my head. So we all have them. You know what I mean? We all have them. And sometimes they're embarrassing. That's the hard thing, is sometimes you don't want to admit them, hence why they're subconscious and why they're deep down, because they probably do come from something that hurt at some point, of not feeling like enough, or, the abandonment, like you said, they come from something that hurt. But I think recognizing them is so big. So let's definitely talk about, what we can do about them now.
Absolutely. And that's beautiful that you said that. So the first step is to like, again, look at the place in our life where we're like, I'm trying to do something, I want to do something different or improve. And yet I feel this like resistance or negative, feeling, or procrastination, which are all just like symptoms of self-sabotage. And then we have to ask ourselves that question. So what am I making this mean, or what am I afraid will happen if I like really show up? And that's where you'll be able to start like extracting and noticing those limiting beliefs. So that's kind of like our prerequisite work.
Yeah.
Then we have a 3-step tool. And this is one of many tools, honestly, that come from, a background of neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis. Like this is about how the subconscious mind works and how we can recondition our own subconscious mind through the understanding of neuroplasticity without having to go into a hypnosis session or anything like that. So this is a tool called autosuggestion. And there's 3 steps to it. The first step is to take that limiting belief we sourced and that prerequisite work, that sort of introspective side, and find its opposite. So for simplicity's sake, let's just say somebody's saying, I want to change jobs, or I want to start a business. But now that I'm looking at it, I'm realizing that I don't feel good enough. I feel like I'm not good enough to do that. I can't handle it. And so they realize, okay, my limiting belief is I'm not good enough. What's its opposite? I am good enough. Okay. So that's step 1, really easy. Find the opposite of your limiting belief. If anybody's like, oh, I found the pattern and I don't know the limiting belief opposite, just go on like antonyms on Google. I will fail. I will succeed. I will be trapped. I am free. I will be abandoned. I will stay connected. So step 1, limiting belief and its opposite. Step 2, how the subconscious mind works is, I'm not a big fan of affirmations. I am not a believer in affirmations, honestly, much at all, because affirmations speak to your conscious mind. So nobody wakes up.
Oh,
Yeah, nobody wakes up and consciously chooses, oh, I'm going to tell myself I'm not good enough all day. What happens is we try things, and then our subconscious mind has this pre-existing belief pattern and says, I am not good enough. So when we go to try something, that's what fires off. So what we have to understand is that we have to communicate to our subconscious mind. Now, your conscious mind speaks language, your subconscious mind speaks in emotions and imagery. So, if I were to say to you, whatever you do not think of the pink elephant.
Oh, pink elephants are dancing in my head.
So,
Everywhere. I feel like I'm watching Fantasia, but there's no pink elephants in Fantasia. There are dancing broomsticks, but I am
there you
digressing.
go. So your conscious mind hears do not, and your subconscious sees images, sees the pink elephant, right? Or pink
Yeah.
elephants. So we have to speak to our subconscious mind. So what's actually really cool is that your subconscious mind, how we speak to it is through memory, because all memories are just a container for emotions and images. If I were to say, tell me your favorite childhood memory, and you were like playing on the playground, for example, as you tell the story, you would see the images of the slide and the playground. And we've all seen people when they tell old stories, they laugh, they smile, they have all the emotion there still when they tell old memories.
Oh my gosh, that is so, like, even that alone to me, I'm like, you're right. Every memory, I can visualize pieces of it and I can feel pieces of it. You know what I mean? That's crazy that it's not even that it's from emotion and imagery.
Yes, exactly. So in step 2, what we need is we need repetition because it's what fires and wires. And we need emotions and images. So we fire and wire into our subconscious mind because that's the language of the subconscious is the emotions and images. So step 2, after we find the opposite of the belief, so I am good enough, step 2 is we need 10 pieces of memory of times we felt good enough. And they can be teeny tiny. They can be like 3 days ago, I was a really good friend. I showed up when my friend needed me. 7 days ago, when one of my children was going through a hard time, I was really present and I took the time to really make them feel better. I was a good mom. And they can be small things. They don't have to be like huge accolades or awards. You just need a little bit of emotion, a little bit of imagery, and we need 10 of them. And we write those things down. Okay. So that's step 2, right? 10 memories of when we felt the new belief we want to install into our subconscious mind.
And that may take some time for some people, and that's okay. So just get your paper, write it on a note on your phone or wherever, but like take the time to think through that and get those.
Absolutely. And if anybody's struggling at all with that, you can look at the different areas of life as a prompt. So you can look at, like, in my career, around friends, around family, as as in a romantic relationship, perhaps, in a situation to do with my relationship to money and how I budget or save. So you can look at the different areas of life, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, as prompts. So step 2 is that last step. And this is the part that people often have the most resistance to, but it's really simple when we chunk it down. Step 3 is that your subconscious mind takes 21 days to build new neural networks that are strong enough that they're going to stay. So neural pathways kind of act like muscles. They atrophy over time when they are not being used. And if we want to build a new neural network, we need to fire and wire it repeatedly for that 21 days to get it really solid. And then it becomes part of our natural programming and we'll reuse it more often. So all we do is we record those 10 pieces of memory into our phone or somewhere we can listen back. And we start a little morning routine or evening routine where we listen back to it and we feel about it and try to see the images. Now, it only takes like 2 to 3 minutes per day. And for anybody who's carried a limiting belief that's sabotaging their life, you know that that's something that's really painful and is taking a lot of time and effort and energy away from your goals or your dream life or from you reaching your full potential. So for 21 days, you can listen to it while you're brushing your teeth in the morning or before bed. You can play it on your drive to work. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to listen back to yourself saying those things out loud. And you just want to practice feeling the emotion, seeing the images. And that's how we really fire and wire new neural pathways. And we actually create new beneficial beliefs in our lives and wipe out the things that have been sabotaging us.
That's amazing. And it does make sense to me because I was listening to just like kind of like a devotional the other day, and they were talking about how wanting to starve the distraction and feed the focus. And so you're saying you're trying to feed the focus with memories where you felt that emotion, which is going to help your neural pathways, which I didn't even know that was a thing. 21 days, that's to me. I knew 21 days to make a habit. I've heard stuff like that, but I didn't even think about the
That's
brain
why.
and creating
Yeah.
the pathways and stuff. So that makes sense to me in that it's more than just like I am confident, saying that over and over again as an affirmation, but like, let me actually visually see a situation or feel a situation where I stood up for myself. You know what I mean? Something as simple as that, where I was confident and I stood up for myself, or whatever your situation is, everyone's different, but we haven't talked about that one even, where people feel insecure, and being able to think of a few of those and then be like, oh yeah, that felt so good. A couple more times. So that makes complete sense to me. I have never heard that before. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it really works. So I've seen this. Like we run online programs, and we've had over 45,000 people come through our programs. And just to give a stat for people, we give like at the end of a course, so people have to actually finish the course, a score. How much did this improve for you? And 88%, 88.7% was the actual number, of people who came through that. And you have to remember, these are self-paced programs. You can't even see if like people are following through for 21 days, reported
Yeah.
their limiting beliefs are gone. So, and this is something I've personally worked on so much with myself, with clients. Like I really want to tell people listening, you can do this at home starting today, and it
Yeah.
really works. And so give yourself the grace to do that. It's an easy tool, and it will honestly like completely transform your life. And anywhere where you felt blocked or resistant, or you kept saying you were going to do something and didn't follow through, you will see like you don't have to live with so much resistance in your life and friction. Things don't have to feel so hard when you're actually dealing with a subconscious level of mind, doing the work there first. It just primes you to feel like you can show up for things at your full capacity without it feeling like it's so much effort or so much heaviness in the background.
No, that makes sense. And then once we get to that point, is there anything additional after that that people can be aware of? Like, obviously, we're not going to be perfect by that, but we're looking for improvement. Obviously, small steps. Anything else to help, as time goes on?
Yes. So I don't know. So I said this briefly earlier, and it was kind of in passing, but I said there was kind of two mechanisms that take
Okay.
place in terms of what influences our subconscious. So the biggest one is our limiting beliefs, and that's the best place for everybody to start.
Okay.
The other place that really affects how we follow through on things and whether we sabotage or not is that we actually all have an internal hierarchy of needs. So we all have things that our subconscious mind likes and cares about more than other things. And we can call these our subconscious needs. For some people, it's family or personal growth. For some people, it's money or wealth building. For some people, it's freedom and social time and emotional connection to others. You can sort of see in like people's personalities those big things that really drive them. Like I would imagine for you, as an example, like probably health, wellness, achievement, maybe connection, and maybe family are like really big things. And you can usually see in people's like what they talk about the most, what they focus on the most, where they spend their most free time dedicated to, what they'll naturally read and research about. All these things would be indicators of like your subconscious needs, because your conscious mind isn't like, hey, go do these things. They're naturally a part of your personality. They're already a part of your conditioning. So they'll emanate from your life and through you. And so when people can start observing, like, what are those things that like I'm really passionate about naturally, I spend my free time on, I think about all the time, I really am focused on, I'm really reliable around, because we're always reliable for the needs that are most important to us. Some people, I'll tell a really quick rabbit hole story here. I had a friend once say, one of the questions to find your needs is like, where are you most organized and reliable? And he's been my friend since childhood. And he was like, I'm not really organized or reliable. And he's kind of a chaotic, he's kind of a chaotic person, in fairness,
I
from
think
like
I
the
would like
outside.
him. I would like him.
and and I was like, well, we're always organized and reliable around the things that we need the
It's
most, that
true.
we really focus on. And when he looked a little closer, he realized, oh my gosh, he loves making music. He'll make music every single day, just as like a habit. He's really reliable there, and he really cares about his friendships. He invests in friends. He always follows up, always checks in, kind of is the one keeping our group of friends together from childhood. And he's like, I'm really reliable with social commitments and with music and creativity. And so sure, he looks like he's chaotic at work perhaps, or things like that, but he's actually really organized and reliable there. So you'll see these things, like we all have this hierarchy of needs. Now, what's interesting is that these are our already existing patterns. These are subconscious. They're not conscious. Nobody's saying, wake up and make sure you make music today and create, or make sure you go to the gym or exercise today, or show up for your kids. Like those are things that, we would naturally do anyways. They're part of our conditioning and what we care about, and all the way deep into our subconscious. And so what's interesting is sometimes we'll see people try to set goals around things that are totally out of alignment with their subconscious needs. So as an example, I had this client once, and I've never worked with people from like a health and fitness perspective, just like psychological, the mind. But her goal, she came in and she was like, I set a New Year's resolution every single year that I'm going to eat healthy and I'm going to go to the gym. And she was pre-diabetic, and she was like, I really need to do it this year and I can't follow through. And now I'm like looking at my mind and trying to see what's going on. And when we looked at her biggest needs were comfort, security, emotional connection, social connection, and family. And so her conscious mind is saying, go to the gym and take cooking classes and cook healthier and lose weight. And her subconscious is like, no, that's taking time away from me feeling comfortable, safe, connected to family, friends, and social. And so what we can actually do, which is super interesting, is we can link our conscious goals with our subconscious needs when we start to recognize what they are. So for her, what we had her do is go and start doing, she joined a hiking club with two of her closest friends. She started taking her kids to the park more often and walking over to the park with her husband and kids. She made an effort when she was trying to learn new things about exercise to do them from home. So she like could learn them on, video, and she would wear comfortable clothes, and she felt safe in the comfort of her own home, and she wasn't stretching herself too much. And then she also took cooking classes with her husband. So what we were doing is we were linking the things she's naturally wired for: comfort, safety, family, social connection, and we aligned them with her conscious goals. And when we do that, we actually remove the form of cognitive dissonance where our conscious mind intends something and our subconscious is like, no, we need these things over here. And when we bring them into alignment, we'll actually see almost immediately the resistance really drops.
That makes sense to me. I feel like I always make a goal in my house. I'm not super organized. I'm not like, I would say like housekeeping, probably I wouldn't win any awards at. But with that said, so I would probably look very disorganized, like from a home point perspective. But in work, I can like chisel down and build back funnels and all kinds of things for work, because in my brain, I'm like, this is how I support my family, and my family is really, really important to me. And when I'm cleaning or doing whatever, that's not really helping it's helping my family, but I'd rather be with my family. So I'm time and like, I don't know what I would call that for work, but now I'm like, oh, that's interesting that I can't transfer that as well to being organized at home, but yet I can be really organized when it comes to functions of work, like your friend,
Exactly, because you've naturally tied it into family. And if family is like a
Yes.
huge need for you, then it goes there. So then what you would do in that particular case is you would start looking at ways you can link those things up together. So things like, can you play some sort of cleanup game with your kids? And you all clean together in some sort of way where you put on music or do something like that.
Which makes sense to me because that's what I do for working out. Like I like to work out, but I want to be with my family. I'm very family oriented. I grew up in a really close, tight-knit family, and I want the same for my family. So I enjoy working on my kids. So that makes sense. Why wouldn't I try that even with picking up stuff like putting on music and whatever?
The things we don't like. And then another one could be like, if you were interested in, I'm sure you're already an incredible mother, but like if you were ever like, oh, I want to learn more about parenting at a specific age or whatever it might be, listen to a parenting podcast while you're cleaning. So that way, like you're doing things that are helping you benefit as a parent while doing things that you initially associate as being points of resistance. And now all of a sudden you're finding ways to wipe out the resistance as a result.
That makes complete sense. I love that that's a second piece. So we all have to think about that. How can we even kind of recognize those? Do people just have to think about almost like, what are my core pieces that are important to me? Like, how do they even recognize those?
Yeah, so people can sit down and you'll start seeing it as patterns. Like a lot of our subconscious is patterns. So you can start and you can sit down and you can actually write out. So here's some like really good questions. The first one is, how do I spend my free time? And that's a huge indicator because like that's something that nobody has to tell us what to do. So imagine for you, you spend your free time probably with your family or as much of your free time as you can. So you would look at that and you would go, okay, like where are the places that I spend my free time? For some people, it's going to be many more answers than one. They'll be like, oh, improving things related to work, because that's actually also tied back to supporting my family and spend time with family and spend time around health and wellness. And so you'll start to see these patterns that emerge. So that's a first question. Another one, like we said, where am I most reliable? Where do I always show up? Where is my place of structure and order in my life? Because again, you'll see actually there are things that everybody is reliable at.
There's definitely things you're all reliable at, and there's definitely things you're not. So I'm now thinking like, okay, think of my reliable things. How can I now link those to the things I'm unreliable on and make them better,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly. Another one would be, what are my natural areas of interest? So, what do I naturally like research about or try to grow myself on? And for some people, like it's personal growth. For some people, it's health and fitness. For some people, it's both of those things. For some people, it's career, like always trying to listen to podcasts about improving their business. So, you want to look for like, where are those natural places that I show up, that I have that like interest and research. And then another really good one is, where do I naturally spend my money? It's actually hilarious, but we spend money on things that we perceive as needing the most. Obviously we have like those non-negotiables, like our bills. I know for me, as an example, I used to not have as high of a need around health. Usually our needs will change a little bit every like few years at a subconscious level, because we get conditioned through repetition. But essentially, I used to not have a huge need for health. And then I like started really focusing on it a few years ago. And now, like to this day, one of the places that I literally spend the most money is on supplements. I constantly spend money on supplements. And so you can see that would be an example of like, okay, that's related to health. Or for me as well, like personal growth books. I'm always buying like a new book, even if I don't read them all in time. So you'll see these natural habits where we'll spend money because we feel good about investing around those things, because they feel like a resonance with our truth. And so once we can find these patterns from those questions, even one other thing is what triggers us the most. We get the most triggered around things that we care about, right? We're like, oh, don't do that. Don't mess with my family. Or if I can miss a workout, oh my gosh, my health, so we'll see those patterns. So people can sit down or sort of journal a little bit about those things. You'll start to see those really clearly emerging patterns. And then you can even look like on people's social media. It's so interesting. People post about the things that they care about the most. Like it emanates through us out into our lives. And so when we do that like introspection, then we'll start to see those clear themes. And then once we have those clear themes, we can start linking, okay, where's my goal? And if my goal is not definitely linked to those clear themes, no wonder I feel resistance. How can I find ways to bridge those things together?
My last question is for you. As I've thought about all of this, and we've talked about a lot of these limiting beliefs are built when we're kids. So we're talking about linking through them, rewiring the brain, what we can do for ourselves. Instantly, my mind, as we've talked to, goes to, as a parent, how can I help my kids now? Because I want to obviously make myself better, but I also want to avoid anything I can to help my kids set them up the best I can. So, what can we now, from a parent perspective, do to help our kids in these situations or to prevent limiting beliefs or just anything that you would suggest?
I love this question. This is such a great share. I think there's a couple things that are so powerful. So, one of the first is just going to the limiting belief idea. If you see your child repeatedly saying things like, I'm not good enough, or I can't do that, or I'm going to fail, or even things like sometimes you'll hear sweet little kids say like, I'm stupid, or I'm not smart enough to do that.
Oh, I've heard my daughter say that and it like broke my heart.
Yeah, it's hard. And sometimes we pick up these ideas from school. Sometimes it can be something that happened at school with two other kids, like something that as a parent you may not even have any control over when it happens. But the beautiful part is, if you can give your children memories and evidence of the opposite repeatedly, it'll actually help recondition away that limiting belief that they've picked up. So if they feel not good enough, or they feel stupid, or they feel like they're not capable, or you hear those like narratives coming out, or they're going to be abandoned, or nobody likes me, that's the I am disliked. Start giving them on a daily basis as many pieces of evidence as you can. Like even if they say that and you give them like 3 or 4 pieces of evidence to oppose it, no, honey, don't say nobody likes you. Look at so-and-so likes you. So-and-so likes you. Remember when they did this? Remember when this happened? And when you can give them evidence of the opposite, you're actually helping to rewire those really painful and limiting ideas that are there. So that's a beautiful practice as a parent for that first piece. And then the second piece that I would say that's so meaningful is children feel loved when they're given connection through their own needs. So like, let's say for you, right? Let's say as an example, because this is for everybody, but this will be an obvious one. So for your listeners who know you well, if you, for example, have somebody at Christmas or the holidays and they come and they give you a gift and the gift is like so much junk food. They give you like all of these like donuts and like junk food. You may feel kind of like unseen a little bit because, you know, for you, like you clearly like care about your health and it's part of who you are and what emanates through you. And so like when somebody does that, it's not going to land with you. You're not going to feel really loved and thought about in that gift. But if somebody, you know, knows that you have really wanted to go to this health event or seminar and they bought you tickets and that, you know that you love the speakers there, you're going to feel really seen and connected to and loved because somebody loved you through your big needs, right? Or if somebody did something for you with family. So that principle applies to everybody. We all actually feel the most loved, seen, and connected when somebody loves us through the way that we need. And so a beautiful gift to give to children, because sometimes I think we can fall into the trap of being like, this is what I need and this is what's important to me. And we project it onto our kids rather than seeing them as like, oh, you know, one of my children, for example, you know, in theory, loves exploration. So I'm going to do, when we spend time together, we're going to do something fun where they can really explore, or they love novelty. We're going to try something new every time we hang out. If we can learn by looking at our kids' behaviors, what their needs tend to be, and then we can actually show up and love them through those needs, that's also a really powerful thing to give to your kids because they're feeling loved as they are and seen and understood for who they are.
Ironically, what you pointed out is exactly what, well, I guess it's not ironic, exactly what we need. We're giving them memories if they say those things, giving them the memory, the imagery, and the emotion to realize, oh, it's not, they're not going to listen to their own voice. They're going to listen to our voices, reminding them, no, remember this situation, this situation, this situation, to help them feel and remember, like you said, to do for ourselves, and then to find their needs and address their needs for them. Like it's the same thing. It's just you're on another end of that same spectrum, which I'm like, oh, that makes complete sense. I love that. We can all do that. We can all do that. In fact, I'm going to think through even for my kids, because I can tell there's some things where they're sensitive about, where, you know, I have a child who feels like she's not very brave or some other things. And I'm like, I'm going to make a list even for them. So next time they say that, I'm not just like, use your affirmation, say you're brave. I'm going to give her 3 examples of where I'm like, no, you are brave, where she can remember. I'm going to write those down for them too, because I'm like, that makes sense. So I can say it to her, you know, and remember, not in the moment be like, you are, with nothing else, you know?
Exactly. And that's how we actually will totally shift those ideas and give her that belief in herself again, which is so beautiful.
That is amazing. All right. Is there anything you feel like for the woman who just feels like, I just self-sabotage everything? Like, what is the last thing, if you could leave her with one piece of advice, anything, what would you want her to know?
I love this question. And you actually touched on this briefly earlier. And I think it's one of the most important first things is if you self sabotage all the time, everywhere, it's not that you're weak or not good enough, or it's not these things. It's that you are intending something that's not privy to your subconscious programming. And I think, you know, you said this yourself. You said, you know, we're quick to judge it. You know, when we don't follow through, we're like, oh, I'm a loser, or I'm this, or I'm that. And we can think so negatively about ourselves, but it's not to do with any of that. It's not to do with your capacity or ability or how great you are. It's
Or
only to do
willpower or
with
any of
that.
those things?
Yeah, exactly. It's only to do with the fact that like you just have programming that's working against you. And so when you can go in and figure out what that conditioning or programming is and rewire it, you'll actually feel such a weight dropped, and you'll realize it was never about me and how powerful or capable I am. It was just about pre-existing conditioning that wasn't working in my favor.
That we can end on that note. All right, tell us where we can find you on social media, on your website. Do you have any freebies, courses, anything? Give us the goods.
Yeah, so I am on personaldevelopmentschool.com, and we actually have a free 7-day trial on there to all of our courses. And every single course at the Personal Development School is just for your subconscious mind. It's all, if it's like a boundary issue, a communication issue, it's all like how to rewire our patterns, not just like learn things. And then I am on YouTube. I put out pretty much daily content at Personal Development School Thias Gibson. And then on Instagram as well at personal development _school.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thias. That was amazing. I'm so excited to actually think through some of my own limiting beliefs and behaviors and fears and really think about reworking them. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so grateful to have this conversation today.
I hope you learned so much from today's episode. I know that I am already going to be thinking through how I can create those new memories and think those through with the imagery and the emotion, how I can connect more of my core beliefs to new things that I want to do, and really just think those through and see how that goes. I love that she gave clear-cut examples and things that we can do right away. I also know self-sabotage is very discouraging. It does make you feel like you want one thing, but you automatically do another. So I think Thias did an amazing job explaining today why that is happening and giving you tips to change that so that you can feel confident and successful no matter what your goals are in life. You're doing a great job. I mean it. From the bottom of my heart, as always, you are doing so much better than you think you are. We'll chat next week.